Actually, we want to thank the Parks and Rec Commission for joining us this evening. This is a study session between the Board of Commissioners and the Parks and Rec Commission. It is Wednesday, March 16th. We're starting a little bit late at 12 after 7. If you have a cell phone, please put it on silent. An announcement that Commissioner Fleece is excused from this meeting, and we will have I'll do the I'll ask the, do we have the clerk here? Yes. You'll do the roll call for the thank you. You do the roll call for the County Commission at this time.
Okay. Commissioner Wheeler.
Yes, ma'am.
Thomas.
Yep.
Richardson.
Here.
Maxwell. Here. Lemko.
Here.
Mitchell.
Here.
Gilman.
Here.
Chairman Inman.
Here. And I would ask that the Parks and Rec Chairman do the roll call for his board as well.
All right, I have excused absences from Commissioners Doran, McKellier, Joseph, and Clark. Commissioner Cass. Commissioner Dorier.
Here.
Commissioner Taylor.
Here.
Commissioner Carstens.
Here.
Commissioner Max Bauer has already weighed in, and that makes us for the quorum as well.
All right, thank you. Next item is, do we have a flag? We don't have a flag
Right
here.
there in front of you, buddy.
All right, so we guess we will dispense from,
Right in front of you, Larry.
we'll dispense with the pledge. We do have a flag? Yeah, we have a little one. So we will move on to public comment. Does any member of the public wish to speak at this time? Hearing none, we will close public comment. We will move on to the discussion item. And what I would like to do is to have the chairman of the Parks and Rec Commission start the discussion off on item 3, item A, the value of Parks and Rec to our community. Mr. Chairman, you have the floor.
All right. Thank you for your attention. Normally I'm an extemporaneous speaker, but I wanted to get out a very clear message, and I didn't want to miss anything. So I'm not normally a reader, but I am going to read my comments today to make sure that I don't miss anything. It can be argued that no state in America has been hit harder by this recession than Michigan. In fact, to call what Michigan has endured these past few years of recession would be to avoid reality. For the economic data that describes the devastation within our state's borders clearly fits the description of a depression. Is there anyone in this room who has not been adversely affected in some way? We all know someone who has lost a job or is unable to find work. We've all been witness to the scores of businesses, restaurants, and shop closing in our community. In 2010, Michigan State University President Dr. Luana Simon announced an initiative called the Michigan Prosperity Initiative, led by the MSU Land Policy Institute and the MSU Extension to find the way to put Michigan back on the path to prosperity. They formed a consortium with a wide spectrum of state and local economic and government experts, including the Michigan Department of Energy, Labor, and Economic Growth, the Michigan Economic Development Corporation, the Michigan Association of Regions, the Michigan Municipal League, the Michigan Townships Association, and the Michigan Association of Planners. The MSU Land Policy Institute has been a national leader in research on what is called the science of place. This research has been able to clearly demonstrate why certain parts of the nation are doing well economically and why others are not. In the past, prosperity followed in cities and regions that enjoyed close proximity to raw materials and transportation infrastructure. A region's economic strength came from an economy based on manufacturing and a skilled workforce. People moved to where the jobs were. Today, places in America that are doing well are embracing what the Land Policy Institute calls the new economy. The new economy is a knowledge-based economy. Business success comes from the ability to incorporate knowledge, technology, creativity, and innovation into products and services. The new economy is dependent on communications, computers, and the internet. Here's the big change. New economy workers don't move to where the jobs are. They live where they want to live and find work there or start a new business. Businesses in the new economy compete to attract educated workers rich in talent and creativity. These workers are looking for interesting and vibrant places to live with a high quality of life. So businesses form or move to places with large concentrations of talent. A Free Press article in December exposed Michigan is facing shortages of talented knowledge workers in engineering, information technology, biosciences, and related high education fields. Michigan has not significantly changed its proportion of the population with education beyond high school for 40 years, according to the article. In short, jobs in the new economy follow talented people. Talented people want to live in quality places. The key to thriving in the new economy is to create and maintain quality places for knowledge workers to live, work, and play. The knowledge workers of the new economy define that as a place having parks, recreation areas, bicycle trails, walking paths, sidewalks, sports venues, hunting, fishing, bodies of water, green space, concerts, coffee shops, music, art, nightlife, festivals, and restaurants. They want to be connected to the internet everywhere they go all the time. They have diverse lifestyle choices and they desire a diverse range of housing types. They are all about creativity, risk-taking, and innovation. Here's the message. Long-term prosperity requires a region to attract talented people as drivers of the new economy. They come, they buy property, they pay taxes, they start businesses, they employ people who pay taxes, and we're all better off. These are not my words, these are not my ideas. These words come from the best minds right here in Michigan, people who understand the state's long history and its challenges and opportunities. And these aren't just theories generated by a bunch of economists sitting inside some think tank. These are observations of things that are going on in places that are thriving and growing. Think of the areas in the state and in the country that you know to be thriving and growing, and then try to convince me that their assessment isn't right on. Crafting a quality place to live, building a strategic plan to enhance, incorporate, include all the things I have mentioned has a name, and it's called placemaking. If you're not thinking about placemaking as part of your strategic vision for this county, then you're way behind. At the Placemaking Summit that took place 2 weeks ago here in Traverse City, Dan Gilmartin, the executive director of the Michigan Municipal League, said that if you don't offer the 20 and early 30-somethings, the group that makes up a large part of the knowledge workers, and the group that the MSU Land Policy Institute keeps talking about, if you don't offer them a lot of things to do, what he called 1,000 nights of fun, they will leave. Think of the young people you know. Are they staying here to build a life, or are they leaving? Probably some of both. But it isn't only about young people. This area is a big draw for retirees as well. And the retirees of today are not planning to sit around the common room in the nursing home waiting for their next meal. They are active and they want to be outside. They want the same things the young knowledge workers want. Parks, bike trails, tennis courts, golf courses, swimming pools, marinas, concerts, art, coffee shops, music, festivals, and restaurants. Give them what they are looking for and they will come and buy houses and condos and pay taxes, and we are all better off. The beauty of all this to you as county commissioners is that Grand Traverse County already offers a lot of these things, but we could do better, a lot better. This area is where people come to play already, and people come here to live so that they can play. We need to ensure that we meet their high expectations for recreational facilities and opportunities so that they want to come back again, or come back again and live. And their children want to go to college, become knowledge workers themselves, and then move back home because there is so much to do around here. Parks and recreation facilities and programs are not just nice to have. Parks and recreation programs and facilities are as important to the long-term growth of this county as anything else you as county commissioners do or work on. The citizens of this county are looking to you to help guide the region through this recession. As you refine your vision for how to do that for this county, I ask you to review the findings of the Michigan Prosperity Initiative and recognize the unique characteristics of this region and its relationship to recreation and our own parks and recreation facilities and programs. So that's the end of my comments. Is there anyone else who would like to add anything, or are there questions?
Maybe you can just ask if your board members have any addition in terms of discussion or comments or personal opinions on the value of parks and recreation to the community. Then I will bring it over to the county commission for comments. Anything from your side?
Recently, there was a Parks and Rec convention here over at the Grand Traverse Resort, and I spent 3 days attending different of the offerings there. But I attended one where they talked about programs, and I was really impressed by a community called Oxford, and the kind of, they have worldwide talent there. And they have a really high tax base, but they offer programs that kind of, it's mind-boggling in terms of the number of programs that they offer that is beyond what we do. and they attracted talent from all over the world. The people who live in that community are from Korea, they're from Japan, they're from India, they're from China, and they're from Europe. And so that kind of blew me away when I compared what they offer in terms of attracting entrepreneurs and talent. And so that was really impressive.
Anything else from your side on that issue? No. All right, county commissioners, any comments or questions regarding that topic?
Well, I suppose I could open it up.
Sure.
Nothing so eloquent as the chair of the Parks Board. Essentially, we certainly have an obligation to our community. We have an obligation to have parks that are clean, that are accessible, and are affordable. It's a pretty simple obligation to meet, I think. It doesn't require an industry that's been created to have conventions, special schools that are set up to train people how to run programs in a park. It just requires clean, affordable, and accessible facilities. It's very simple. Thank you.
All right. Any other commissioner want to make a remark on that topic? Commissioner Lemko.
Yeah, I think it's really important to know that the amount of money that we spend on parks in Grand Traverse County, I saw a spreadsheet that we spent $3.5 million on parks with our townships, our city, our county, and our villages. Are we spending that correctly? Could we be spending it better? Could we become a county known for its parks? How do we get there and how do we make it happen? The thing that really bothered me more than anything else, and I was probably part of the problem, was the South Civic Center when they decided to become their own separate authority. We never went through the Parks and Recreation Board when we started funding them. We put $200,000 down there for their parks. We never went through Parks and Recreation. We bypassed it. That was a mistake. So where do they fit within your park plan? How can we make all parks in all county, all over the county? I mean, I don't know how many, I think we got over 200 parks in our, or more. I think there's a lot of parks that probably aren't even on our radar that are owned in some of our subdivisions, that subdivisions own or may not have any ownership to, but they're being used. How do we really start to utilize and market that? The way we got it right now is so fragmented that it's hard to promote us. It can't be promoted when you fragment it as bad as we do. And I'm just talking about parks. Recreation is another part of it. How do we provide recreation in our area? I don't think we as a county should just take over. I think we should be there to facilitate and to help. How do we make it better? How do we help those organizations that are in place to stay viable? How do we help them to make it so that they are always going to be here for the future for all of our kids and all the people that are coming here? Those are some of my questions that I have.
I have a remark unless someone else has one right immediately. Yeah, I guess it's my personal opinion. You can't really put a price tag on the dividend that you're receiving from the programs that we're running and in the Parks and Rec area, keeping kids and families busy. It builds leadership skills. It builds really the structure of what soon will be their professional lives. The issue of working with people and becoming a team and challenging yourself to do better, those kinds of issues. You know, back when I got on the board 18 years ago, the Board of Commissioners at that time said, we would rather invest in the infrastructure of the Parks and Rec area within the county than spend money on juvenile detention centers and higher costs for jails and courts. And if we can, you know, continue to see a trend where
We're seeing less in reduction as the population grows in those problem areas, and keep investing in trails and softball diamonds and soccer fields and those kinds of things to keep kids and families busy. What kind of price tag can you put on that? And is there really an expectation that everything we do in county government needs to break even or pay for itself? So those are the fundamental, questions that I've always had, is that what measurement can you put on all the success that we've had with families and kids by running and being involved in being involved in Parks and Rec. And I know the philosophy has been, we've been the landlord, we provide the facilities, and the user groups come together. Fortunately, we got a lot of great volunteers in the community that have made time and effort to keep things going and keep these organizations and kids and families together every year during running these programs. So we've really had a great partnership in terms of the philosophy. But I think that's what brings the attraction and the value of Grand Traverse County versus other counties when people think about where they want to live and retire to or whatever. Not only is it the natural beauty of our area, we got the shoreline and a perceived less crime rate, and a good school system and an excellent hospital system, strong retail development, but we also have, in my opinion, with the townships, even though they're doing their own thing, and South County's doing their own thing, and we're doing our own thing. I mean, if you add it all up, it's a huge dividend to the community in terms of the return I think we're getting on our dollars and on our time and investment. Anyone else have a comment? Commissioner?
I've got a question. When are we going to put the ball diamonds in out on Keystone Road? Took the trees out, 5 years ago? With the idea of putting ball diamonds in on the corner of Keystone and Beverly Road.
Jason, that's can you address that?
And then we'll go to Commissioner Richardson.
Last year in 2009, we put together an agreement. It was a 3-year agreement with Traverse City Little League for them to develop those fields, which would have resulted in a 15-year lease for them to have primary use of the fields, with at least one additional 5-year addition to that program. So we are relying right now on Traverse City Little League to raise the funds to build those diamonds according to a master plan drafted by Russ Clark approximately 10 years ago.
You can't do anything until 500,000 yards of dirt are moved. Because you play baseball on a level field.
No,
are they supposed to do that?
They are supposed to do that according to their agreement.
Right.
It was an agreement that was signed it was passed by both Parks and Recreation Commission and Board of Commissioners.
Commissioner Richardson.
I don't think there's any question that citizens of this county really value their parks. We went through a public strategic planning session 2 years ago when I first got on board, and it was held at the Civic Center. It went over I think it was 2 consecutive Thursday nights, if I'm not mistaken. And the overwhelming thing that people really loved and were willing to invest money in and wanted to put time and effort into was parks. And we do have a great park system here. And any time you've seen a park at any level threatened in any way, the citizens get together and say, no, you can't mess with that. I mean, even the few times that Traverse City has tried to take a little piece of what's defined as parkland and widen the street or something, the citizens get all bent out of shape and say, no, that's parkland, you gotta leave that alone. What I see, now speaking more philosophically, is that the county and the other units of government together, taken as a whole, taken individually, we should be providing the infrastructure. We should be providing the parks, we should be providing the areas where people recreate. But then I think the important thing is to see, to make sure all that stuff gets used as much as possible. I mean, the worst thing about this whole, I know we're going to talk about American Legion Baseball here pretty quick. The worst thing about this whole fight about the American Legion Baseball is it turned into a us versus them kind of thing, you know, whichever side you happen to be on in that argument. But the point really is, and we seem to forget about the fact that the whole point of the thing is to involve kids in a baseball program. I mean, it seemed highly controversial to me. So maybe we should have, maybe both groups should have been running a baseball program. Maybe we should have said, hey, you know, American Legion's going to use it, da-da-da-da-da, but gee, we have these open times here. Does anybody else have any ideas of how to get more kids using those fields to play baseball? So I think we need to keep looking at it in terms of how inclusive can we make it, and how, you know, as many opportunities as possible. And again, the county is still in the best place to provide the underpinnings on the infrastructure, to take care of that infrastructure, to build the fields, to, I know that's not how contracts are written all, but maybe that's something you need to look at as a Parks and Rec Commission. You know, what does it take to provide that infrastructure so, you know, people can utilize it?
Commissioner Wheelock.
Well, I guess the thing that we have to remember when we talk about Parks and Rec is this community has been very blessed with the partnerships that we have between the county, ICE, the American Legion, the YMCA, that we have been able to just be the landlord and provide the parks. And those organizations have come forward and developed fields. You know, along with a lot of other people, picked up rocks at where the Keystone soccer fields are for a lot of hours. And, you know, I did sprinkler holes in the ball diamonds at Long Lake Township's parks, you know. But the point is, we've been very fortunate that we have some very, very nice parks with a very little commitment of both time and money on the county's behalf to do that. And that being said, I'm not sure that those volunteers are readily available to continue operating programs into the future. You know, I'm involved in a number of volunteer organizations, and all of them are struggling for people. And, you know, I think we have to have a contingency plan to continue to provide. Every kid that wants to play baseball needs to be able to play baseball, whether it's American Legion baseball, whether it's Little League baseball, or whether it's a Grand Traverse County program to play baseball. Every kid that wants to play baseball needs to have an opportunity, you know, and I'm a firm believer in that. But, you know, we still have limited facilities, we have limited times, you know, and the follow-up letters that we've received after the program, you know, we heard a lot of things about, well, people wanted their kids to play, but they didn't want them to play on Friday night, or they didn't want them to play on Saturday. They wanted the season to be over by Cherry Festival. Well, you know, you can still only get so many games in these time frames, you know. And, you know, I coached a long time, both at Long Lake and the Civic Center. And it's very, very difficult to get parents to realize, well, you know, we got a 5 o'clock game. Well, I can't be there at 5 o'clock, so, you know, my son won't be able to play this week. I went and picked up kids, you know. But the fact is, we've been very fortunate to have these volunteer organizations help us develop parks programs and recreation programs. But I don't know that we can count on that into the future. I really believe that we have to have some sort of a contingency that we're willing to do some of the other things. You know, and you know, Jason will tell you that you look at big county-run program, parks and recreation programs, their revenue sources from programs. You don't get any money from owning the park. You get money by operating a baseball program, by operating a swimming pool, by operating a softball program. That's where you get the fees, that's where you get the money that pays to operate the whole Parks and Recreation program.
All right. Commissioner Gilman.
Well, first of all, I don't think the county should be running any profitable ventures in that way anyway. I mean, that doesn't even.
I'm not saying profitable, I'm saying that's where you get the revenue to operate the park
And
program.
as far as volunteers, if there is value in a community for any particular project or any particular thing, there will be people who will take up that cause. And if nobody shows up to coach a baseball team, you know, it might well be because of the way they've been treated, of the way they expect to be treated, by either parents or even the county itself. And you know, I think that it just goes to follow, if there is value, it'll be there. But to have us create an environment where we determine as a public body, you know, disconnected, whether or not we have kids. I mean, most of us don't have kids playing baseball. Whether we determine who's coaching, what we're doing at the baseball game, I just don't think that's right. That should be run by the parents. It should be run by the volunteer organizations that have been doing it for years, successfully, and raising good citizens. And I just, you know, instead of somebody, you know, trained to turn a county venture, they're turning it into a county profit-making venture. I just don't agree with that at all. I don't think that's a function of county government. We do own parks. We should keep our parks available for those purposes. We should make our parks available to the people who pay the taxes, to their children, to the visitors who want to live up here and see what beautiful parks we have. But if the parks require us to insert some artificial value, then maybe it's not worth having. You know.
All right, any other comments?
Yeah, I guess, you know, I'd like to switch gears a little bit and kind of look at the Parks and Recreation and the County Commission. I get the feeling that we're not on the same page. And I think it's really important.
We have that on the agenda if we can address
Okay,
that.
but I think another thing that we want to be looking at is how do we, maybe should we look at combining parks for the county and the city? We already provide lifeguards in the city for their pool. The city provides lifeguards on the waterfront. Why can't we use the same lifeguards? I mean, how can we start working together? How can we start making this not just a city thing or not just a county thing, but a people thing? How do we take care of the people and get them involved and get them the opportunities?
Okay. Any other comments before we move on to the next item? Rob?
Just real quick on the philosophy of parks. I kind of agree with Jason Gilman, and I'll pose a rhetorical question to kind of state my position. Should we charge the parents of the kids playing baseball a little something extra so that we can have a campsite on Power Island?
All right. Okay.
Good deer hunting out there, I think.
And again, I think, you know, just understand that, you know, this is a forum that we're using in a study session to express our personal opinions as elected officials. And the meeting wasn't really designed to make, you know, formal decisions. So, moving on to
Commissioner Max Barras.
Oh, say Commissioner Max Barras. I'm
Well, as
sorry.
long as you said personal opinions as an elected
Yes.
official, here I go.
Okay.
I am a firm believer that the way to involve community is through our partnerships, through our nonprofit volunteer partnerships. And when you say, Commissioner Wheelock and Commissioner Richardson, that every child should be able to play baseball, I agree with you. And every child through the American Legion, whether they can afford it or not, can play baseball. So my philosophy is, I don't believe that government functions better than a nonprofit, dedicated group of volunteers. When you take a look at Friends of Ice, who operate the hockey rink at Howe Arena, how would you match that with government employees? I mean, they come in, they put the rink up, they maintain it, they schedule, they take care of employees, and they pay rent, and they pay their share of utilities, and they pay a portion of what it costs to plow the parking lot. They're a group of dedicated volunteers. I just simply don't believe that government can do that job better than they can for less money.
Commissioner Richardson?
I guess you would ask the question of, you know, how professional fire departments ever drove out the volunteers.
All right.
Because volunteers obviously work better.
All right.
Chris, I hope you weren't including the federal government.
Okay, we'll move on to the next item, and that is Parks and Rec Strategic Plan Review. And when we had met just to kind of put together the agenda, they felt it important that they kind of report out what their strategic plan looks like and maybe some rationale behind it. So you have the floor.
Thank you. There was a question, one of your earlier meetings a month ago or so, about our movement forward with strategic plans, and Commissioner Lemko's question about what is the best way to do parks is a valid thing. And so I just want to update the Board of Commissioners on the things that are going on in our strategic plan and for the year and longer ahead. Last summer, under Commissioner Max Bauer's leadership, we convened for several intensive sessions to work on a strategic plan. We were trying to hammer out workable sets of strategic goals, objectives, and the priorities for where those sit. So, like most strategic planning sessions, we came up with a list of probably 50 or 60 top priorities, which then had to be prioritized in the actual top priorities. And we came up with 9 objectives. And this was the first time, is my understanding, that the strategic plan had been formed by the Park and Rec Commission, giving the director clear guidance on what he's supposed to work on every day. We took a fairly conservative approach to the process, in my opinion. The emphasis was on ensuring that our house was in order first, before we were embarking on major projects. We divided those objectives into 3 main goals, big picture stuff. The first one, they're all very obvious to me: to create recreational opportunities for the citizens of Grand Traverse County, to have a well-organized park system, and to provide parks and recreation facilities. So with those goals in mind, we established the specific objectives, which are listed as first, to provide the most value at the best cost to the citizens. Now, that objective is not specific and not terribly actionable, but we felt that it was important to place a continual emphasis on that principle. Likewise, our next objective was to maintain programs cost effectively. Again, simple and non-specific, but we were stating that the fundamental philosophy of the Park Commission is that while we would all like to provide an unlimited array of services to all the citizens at no cost, that's just not reality. And so we want our director to ensure that that an appropriate attention is focused on making sure that our programs are cost effective, that expenses are controlled while we provide the programs and the facilities that we do. Our third objective is exactly what Commissioner Lemkool was speaking of. The objective was to explore opportunities to combine recreation services with city, township, and other providers. Now, led by Commissioner Russ Clark, who's a member of this commission for more than a decade and been in the landscape architecture business for almost 4 decades, he made a compelling case to us last spring of the many benefits that could be realized by combining the numerous parks and recreation entities in the county into a regional parks authority. Within the county, there are 7 separate township parks and recreation commissions, plus 1 in Kingsley, 1 in Fife Lake. Traverse City has 1. Traverse City and Garfield Township have a have a park authority, and then the Grand Traverse County Commission. The 12 separate bodies have 78 individual commissioners, plus 29 full-time staff and 96 part-time staff, all setting policy and managing 102 different parks and properties in the county. I don't know how many mowers, tractors, trucks, ATVs, and other vehicles are owned and maintained among these departments. The current system is simply rife with duplication. Duplication costs taxpayers money that could be better spent on other things. But the idea of a regional park authority is not without its challenges, certainly. The objective was to explore the opportunities, not to make it happen, but to explore, because there's a lot of conversations that need to occur before that. So that's what we're doing. We're exploring right now. We don't know what the answer will be at the end of the day. We don't know if we'll be able to generate the necessary support. If the answers come out in a positive way that this is something we can do, there are politics involved. There are a lot of entities. There are a lot of people that have their own interests. We're intrigued by where the conversation might lead. It's probably not a 6-month project. It's probably not a 2-year project. It may take a lot longer to figure out what all the moving parts are. how the machine works, communicate the benefits, gather consensus, all the stuff that makes forward progress happen. According to your website, the Grand Traverse County Board of Commissioners envisions a county government that encourages risk-taking and innovation to increase the efficiency and effectiveness of our services. As a commission, we agree with that and look forward to reporting to you on what we find. The fourth item on our objective is to explore a plan for executing a needs analysis. Public input is required as part of a DNR master plan that has to be submitted to be eligible for grants from the DNR fund. However, gathering public input is also good governance. We're in the process of exploring different methods for how to do that and having some success with that so far. Our next objective was to establish a business plan for each park, starting with the Civic Center and Twin Lakes. We're doing preliminary steps right now in that analysis that should help us formulate long-term and short-term plans on how best to use these valuable properties. We had a public input session at the Civic Center on the 22nd of February to take inputs on the Civic Center property itself, and Russ Clark is working with that information that we gathered at that session still. Our next objective was to develop an ADA transition plan for each park. The Americans with Disabilities Act mandates certain requirements to assure that each park is accessible to, and includes design considerations that enable easier access to recreation facilities for people with disabilities. While much of the park system is in compliance with the ADA, we've been delinquent in building the ADA transition plan that is required by federal law. We haven't ignored the requirements, but we need to have a comprehensive review of the system to determine what we've got done, what we don't have done, and what we're going to need to do in the future as we continue to modify our parks. We also need to conduct a safety audit for each park. The park system has been developed over the course of many decades, and there have been continual changes and improvements being made during that time period. We have to take a comprehensive look at their facilities, compare them to what the current safety standards are. Some of the things we put in 10 or 15 years ago are no longer considered to meet safety standards. And we want to work to identify hazards, we want to reduce mishaps, we want to manage the risk for the county's taxpayers. The eighth objective was the biggest one, to develop a strategic plan for each park. And with that would come then a strategic plan for the system. We're not prepared to engage on that for 102 parks, but we can engage on that for the parks that we have. It is our number one focus, our number one role as a commission is to provide that vision for the park system, what the park system should be, what it should become, a long-term view. It's also the most difficult thing to do. We are a young commission, no doubt. 6 of our 10 members are in their first or second year on the commission. We're still learning how to work effectively together, and we're still learning how to speak effectively with one voice. I think we'll get there. In the end, we'll have a plan for each park that will establish trail markers for where we want to go next, whether that includes acquisition of additional properties or construction projects or simply maintaining our parks the way they are. The final objective in that strategic plan was to update our DNR master plan. It was last completed in 2003, and a DNR plan is current for 5 years. Municipalities will not be awarded any grants from the DNR fund without a current DNR master plan. The master plan is really just a detailed inventory of what the park properties and facilities that we have, but it also must include public input for future use. The DNR fund grants are used primarily to purchase land or to build things. And at the current time, we don't have any plans right now to purchase property or to build things, but of course we're going through our strategic plan process for what we're going to do with each park. And once we complete that, we may have things that we want to buy or build. Until we have a specific plan to acquire land or construct a building, the absence of a current DNR master plan hasn't really negatively impacted the county. Once we have a plan to build or buy something, then we'll need that plan. But we're going to finish that here shortly over the next several months, and engage in the conversation with what we're going to do with our park system while we're doing that. Jason Jones has provided us with a work plan on each of these objectives, start dates and proposed end dates, and he updates us monthly at our monthly meetings. And that's status of our strategic plan.
Okay. I would ask if you have your board members make any remarks if they'd like, and then we can move to the commission.
Commissioner Dwyer.
Yeah, I appreciate the walkthrough of our strategic plan. I was lucky enough to bring along my copy of the priorities and goals that we addressed first. And I want to point out just a few things that you mentioned that I just want to bear repeating. One of our primary goals is to create recreational opportunities for the citizens of Grand Traverse County. Compare that to Mr. Gilman's list of obligations that we have, and you'll see that this is much beyond keeping clean, affordable, and accessible parks. I think I think that's an obligation of ours too, is to provide recreational opportunities. And I think it is an obligation of the county commission to make sure that gets done. You have a Parks and Recreation Commission who is entrusted with that job. And I would hope that we can work together to move forward.
Anybody else on your board wants to speak to that strategic plan? Okay, on the commission side, anybody have any questions on the strategic plan overview? Commissioner Gilman.
The DNR master plan, your final seeking funds to primarily use to buy properties and whatnot. Do we not have adequate facilities now, do you think?
I think there's always more that can be done. I think they're pretty good. I think they could be better.
My concern, and pardon me if I'm putting it in a somewhat crude manner, at the point where we are given money to buy property, or the Parks Commission is given money to buy property, that then becomes the responsibility of the county facilities. It's like giving a credit card to you, here, go dress the pig you bought. I mean, that's, we have a limited amount of resources to carry on and maintain what we have now. We are in the midst of probably a prolonged economic downturn, and I would just advise, be very careful going forward and pursuing, spending a great amount of resources to that end.
Any other comments? Commissioner Loco?
Yeah, I'd just like to say thank you. I don't think that many of us, in particular myself, realized what your plan was. And I think you were neglectful in not sharing that with us. And that may have created a certain amount of what are we doing, how are we working together, and all that kind of stuff. So I'd encourage you to continue to keep us informed as to how you're doing on your project with Jason and your commission, to following through to make sure these things are being taken care of. Listening to that, I think you're right in the same direction I am, and I feel comfortable that you are there. I just don't feel that you've communicated with the community or with the commissioners about what you're doing. And I think that's really important when you start doing that kind of stuff. If you don't communicate, then people think that you're not doing anything, so therefore they have a lot of questions.
Commissioner Wheelock and then Commissioner Maxbauer.
Well, I've been here long enough to remember the discussions that we went around the table with when we bought the Maple Bay property. It's real easy to sit here and say, well, we don't want to buy property, but at the same time, when those opportunities come to you, you have to simply seize the moment. And it was a very accelerated pace. We had a number of special meetings and various things because here was an opportunity to secure a half a mile of East Bay frontage. How many acres? But anyway, this was an opportunity to secure land for posterity that will never come again. It simply never will. Just a couple weeks before that time, I'd spent some time out in Yellowstone National Park, and I came back and I said, how could Teddy Roosevelt have possibly saw 75 years ago the importance of preserving that piece of property? So, when we think about our parks and our recreation, remember, they're not just for our use. They're for our kids' use, our grandkids' use, and for the posterity that will come after that. And, I don't know that there's any piece of property right now that I would say that Grand Traverse County is looking at You know, I know that in Long Lake Township, for example, where I live, they recently purchased, a little while ago now, they purchased the property the Boy Scouts owned on Cedar Lake and Cedar Run Creek. They recently, as within the last 6 months, purchased property actually into Benzie County, also on Cedar Run Creek, because it was immediately adjacent and in part of that wetlands, to preserve that land for the future. And you know, I wasn't sure I supported the idea that Long Lake Township should own property in Benzie County, but you know, that being said, we've preserved a very valuable piece of property for the future. And you know, the number of kids that can go out and hike along the creek, you know, I did it a long time ago. I'm old now, so I don't want to hike down through that rough ground. But you know, the fact is we need to remember that we're preserving this land as park. Just because we're not playing baseball on it doesn't mean it's not an important park.
Okay. Commissioner Maxbauer.
Commissioner Lemcool, if there is a lack of communication between the Parks Commission and the county board, I'm the one to shoot arrows at. I am the liaison. In defense of not necessarily bringing the strategic plan to the county board, we didn't really, it took us almost a year really to finish the strategic plan, and it was finished about, I don't know, in the fall, wouldn't you say, Al?
Yeah, late summer or early fall.
You know, the minutes of our meetings are in our packets. Jason does a report, but if there is a need for additional communication, please see me. I certainly will try to do a better job.
I don't mean to just look at you for the county commission. I'm talking about for the general public too. I think the general public needs to know where it's going and how it's going, and I don't think it's just us as commissioners. We can help you get the word out if we have the information.
And I'm going to toss in that I do happen to agree with you that an authority would be extremely beneficial for Grand Traverse County. And that's it.
Yeah. So yeah, just to add on to Sonny's thing of the Boy Scout property, I was on the Boy Scout board when that was come up for sale, and I fought it because of the fact that I thought we needed to preserve it for perpetuity. And when the township come on board to be able to take that on and put it into a conservation easement and be able to keep it there, then I could feel more comfortable in doing it. My first camp out as a Boy Scout was on that property. I helped plant those pine trees on that property.
I was going to say, those trees were about this high then.
No, they were, when we planted them, they were little seedlings.
Now you're going to get a description yet.
And I spent many a weekend out there planting those trees. So it's great, you know, I have a personal interest in that piece of property, but, you know, we all have personal interests in pieces of property around our community. And we have to be able to recognize those personal interests so that we make sure that that happens.
Okay. Any other comments on that particular item? Commissioner Gilman.
Just one question. What use are we getting out of Maple Bay right now? Are we getting
Jason, can you speak up?
I'm sorry, what use are we getting out of Maple Bay right now?
Can I speak to that?
Sure.
Not only Maple Bay, but also Yuba Valley, both of those were preserved because Traverse City gets their water supply from East Bay, and both of those flow into East Bay. And so, in some degree, the Conservancy has a plan. They all through the chain of lakes, they have been preserving land bordering these water bodies. So then, by doing so, they're in the public sphere, but they're natural areas, and it's to preserve those places for wildlife and just for the beauty of the places, but also to contribute to water quality and also flood control and things like that. Maple Bay was also protected because of the species that it afforded a place to live in, and because there's a certain segment of the population that actually finds spiritual value in places like that and visiting places like that. And so even though there's no baseball games going there, it also is preserving biodiversity that is disappearing. And it's also preserving something that people come north to see. Just places like that in their haste to develop, or because they wanted always to have it usable just by humans, those kinds of places that have disappeared downstate. And I came up here personally. I visited well, I came up the first time in 1945, but the second time I came up was 1964. And I had planned on living in Ann Arbor the rest of my life. But when I visited this area, it just kind of blew me away, and I said, this is where I want to live. And I ended up even changing my major and everything else so that I could live up in a place like this. And so, but I did it because there were places like Brownbridge Pond and places like Maple Bay and places that just were extremely attractive and beautiful to be in and to live near. So the money to preserve those places was provided by foundations aimed at providing places for migratory birds to utilize and for waterfowl and things like that, as well as for donations from a lot of the citizens. Right now, Acme Township is in a shoreline preservation thing. We're actually trying to create a place for people to bathe and to swim and what have you. And in some degree, to the extent that becomes a reality, it'll provide places for people to recreate and enable Maple Bay to serve the purpose of being a wildlife area and a place where people can go to hike and what have you. But it's not primarily meant as a recreation place, and it's also a place where agriculture is carried on extensively. The Sen Brothers till the fields and what have you, and sell the product. But it also offers a vista when you enter Grand Traverse County from the north that's breathtaking, particularly in the spring. And so even though there's no baseball diamonds there, it has for many a tremendous amount of value. And there were many people, citizens, who contributed to the preservation of that area, knowing what it was meant to be.
I appreciate that.
You can also hunt out there.
No, I appreciate that. Well, part of my point is, we assign a value though to that, because obviously we're willing to maintain at a cost of keeping that. Am I correct? I mean, we have a cost that we lose. For example, if a private owner had it, we would be collecting tax revenues. We have a maintenance cost in consideration. I mean, we have to maintain some form of liability on the property, do we not?
I don't know what the expenditure is annually for Maple Bay.
I think if you ask Jason, the expenditures for Maple Bay, what part of the Parks and Rec budget does that take up?
I can't tell you a figure right now. We have 14 different budget programs. I can't tell you what that one is exactly. It's one of our smaller budgeted parks.
It's very small.
It's very small.
With
Yes.
a minimal amount of maintenance that goes on at that park. Any maintenance that's done out there is typically done at Sen Brothers in their farming endeavors. In the winter, we do no snow removal out there. The maintenance out there and the costs associated with that park are minimal.
Bob, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Bill, did you have a remark that you wanted to make, or did you set?
No, I walk my dog there every 2 weeks. So I use it. It's
All right.
invaluable. It's northern Michigan, and that's disappearing all around us. It's a wonderful opportunity. I don't know the numbers, Mr. Wheelock. I think maybe you do, but my understanding was it was basically a donation to the county.
Yeah.
Most of the money come from the DNR Land Trust.
Right, came from the land trust.
And that's based on having a good plan in place that includes a
Right.
needs analysis.
Right. Any other, Commissioner Burgess?
I mean, this whole question of, can we afford parks? I think the public has said, yes, we can afford parks. And I can relate a little story. It's not about a beautiful wildlife park, but it's about the park that the senior center downtown Traverse City happens to sit on. Because this came up when I was on the citizens group that was looking at the city finances. In fact, I was dealing with your father on this, Jason. And the idea was, well, we could sell a piece of ground for like $4 million and finance a new senior center. And of course, you know, a lot of people who enjoyed the senior center being right on the bay raised holy hell about it, you know, back and forth. There were actually only two people on the group who voted against that idea. It was me and Mark Crane, and the two of us helped draft the thing that eventually became the, you know, the millage last fall, which created a countywide senior center. But my comment at the time was, you know, Traverse City could resolve all of its money problems if it wanted to sell off all of its waterfront property. But I don't think the citizens of Traverse City would stand for that.
Right. Okay, any other comments on the strategic plan? All right, we will move on to the role between Parks and Rec Commission and the county board and the current structure we have in place. And I know that from time to time, we've asked Bob Cooney to clarify that for us in terms of your authority versus, you know, whether we have authority to intervene or not intervene. And I want to make sure that everyone here understands that, you know, we value the appointments we make for all our boards and commissions, and that, you know, you assist us in making public policy and budgetary decisions, and we can't do this all, you know, just solely by the county commission. And so we do appreciate your time and effort and your value to the community in serving on this board. And I know there's been, from time to time, some questions about, you know, is it their responsibility or our responsibility, or who makes that decision, those kinds of things. But, so if we have any questions about that, you know, Bob is here hopefully to help us with that, because I know that we have some sort of a written agreement, I guess, between the Parks and Rec Board and the County Commission on its current structure. But do you want to, Mr. Chairman, open up the remarks on that, and then you guys have any questions, we'll take it to the County Commission, and then we can just ask Bob if there's any clarification.
Okay. I'll begin again with comments. Your website states that the Grand Traverse County Board of Commissioners envisions a county government that collaborates with other units of government on common issues for the benefit of the community and its individuals. Now, it is not at all my intention to try to revisit the decision of the American League Baseball or to convince you that I'm right or anything like that. Not at all. That is not my intention. My objective is to try to facilitate better communication. And the communication isn't all going to be happy and friendly. That's not what, I don't want us all to be friends necessarily, but Commissioner Lemkuhl is exactly right that through a failure to communicate what we were doing, you didn't know we were doing anything, and therefore you thought we were doing nothing. And I'm not saying that to accuse, that's just the reality of the way interpersonal communications goes. There is no denying that it's the American Legion baseball program that brought this meeting together. And I do want to emphasize a point that when we made, as a Park and Rec Commission, the decision to take the baseball program from the American Legion, we were responding to urgent requests from some very upset parents. They were unhappy about the way the program was run. They were unhappy with the way that their complaints were being addressed by the American Legion. So we gathered facts, we looked at both sides of the story, and then we made a decision on really very short notice to recommend to the Board of Commissioners a county-run program for 2010. Well, clearly you as the Board of Commissioners has every right to overturn your own decision, because at the time we were an advisory board only. We made a recommendation to you. You made a decision to run the program, and then so you're certainly welcome to overturn that. It appears from my point of view that the decision that was made this January was made without gathering all the facts, without consideration for both sides of the issue, without consideration for any other alternatives that might possibly have worked out better than going full left or full right on this, and certainly without collaboration with other units of government, namely the Park and Rec Commission, who had a lot of knowledge and experience on this issue. I realize that campaign promises were made and campaign promises were kept. I'm not trying to stand in the way of that. But there were real reasons why the county ran the baseball program in 2010. And there were reasons that matter. They matter a lot. The citizen parents who asked us as a Park and Rec Commission to intervene in the baseball situation, they matter just as much as the citizen members of the American Legion who felt disrespected by the change that was foisted upon them. There were other solutions that could have been discussed, no doubt. Instead, the county forgave the Legion's $10,000 debt from 2009, a debt which, by the way, was in arrears by the time that the parents came to ask us to intervene in the program. We handed over $10,000 worth of new baseball equipment and we cut the Legion's rates. Now we're receiving pointed inquiries from other organizations about how they can get the same discount on their fees. I'm not really sure what to tell them on that. If you as a board truly envision a county government that collaborates with other units of government, then I would ask for your commitment to collaborate with us in the future on Parks and Rec issues. Those are my comments on the role of the Park and Rec Board. Anyone else?
Anyone else on the board?
I think he said very, very well what I was intending to say. I don't need to say anything. He said it very well. Thank you very much. But you're exactly right.
Well, you did a great job. I've got a lot to say, actually. I'm going to start with the letters that we've received so far. You guys put us in a heck of a position here. I spent 6 years on the YMCA board. The YMCA wants to know why they're not getting a discount too, and they've actually asked for a discount. Now, is that up to us to solve? You kind of stepped in, you took over, you undid what we did. And you've left us with quite a mess to clean up. There's also the Breakers and the high school swim team so far have given us written requests. I'm sure ICE is going to be knocking on the door pretty soon. My son went through the GTHA program, and he skated in there for since between 6 years old and 18 years old. So I've got a lot of experience with those people too. ICE costs are tremendous. They're always complaining that they pay too much money for the rental of our ice rink at the Civic Center. How are we supposed to look them in the face and say, yeah, okay, then you still got to keep paying that money, even though the American Legion got these parades? I guess that's it for now. I wish you'd let us do our job. I'm in kind of an unfortunate position here. I got to get up to my high horse for a second. I went to one of those schools that you referred to. I've got a master's degree in Parks and Recreation Administration. I spent a lot of years in the business a long time ago. And then, coincidentally, I went to law school a little bit later on. So I'm in kind of a unique position looking at this little problem that we have here. I've read the resolution that you passed. I've read the bylaws. It's pretty clear to me who has the authority, particularly to contract in the area of Parks and Recreation. It's this body here has that authority. When you step in and you dictate the terms of the contract, it really puts us in a strange position. Two different parties can't have that same authority. That authority is invested in the Parks and Recreation Commission. I think you ought to let us do our job. We've heard what you've said. I'm just speaking for myself here, but the sense that I get from the board is that we're committed to making the American Legion baseball program work. Let us do that. And in order to do that, you need to just step back and let us figure it out. That's all I'm going to say for now.
And I just want to share my remarks in this meeting for setting up the agenda, because there was a moment there where there was an extended discussion about this particular issue, and which really promoted getting this on the agenda. And that was, going back to my original comments, was that, the value we place in placing citizens on our boards and commissions to help us with policy budgetary decisions. And I indicated to them at that meeting that for the most part, over the last 18 years that I've been a county commissioner, I could think maybe a handful of decisions that were made by other boards and commissions we had disagreements with. But overall,
the decisions that were made by these boards and commissions were very appropriate and served the public well. I guess it's just my personal opinion, if I can speak first on this, is that there probably will be times where the county commission has a different philosophy on a particular topic or subject or a direction that one of our boards and commissions are going in. And I think where we could have done better is that if we would have held off on that decision for 5 days and held our special meeting, aired out, at least as a courtesy to you folks, that this was a strong feeling that we had and why, and that we would come to some decision at that meeting about how we wanted to handle this particular issue. But we have the same thing going on in resource recovery. They want to move forward with a millage to support various programs, and we have a philosophy that we do not want to put a millage on place to do that. We do have, time to time, a different direction that some of our boards and commissions want to go in from a policy standpoint. And I would hope that you would understand that our role is not to micromanage our boards and commissions, and that we should allow you the latitude to manage the programs that we've designated for you to do, or your roles and responsibilities. But there could be times where those philosophies don't match. And I think when they don't match, I think it's up to, really what we need to make a commitment on is if they don't match, then we really need to come together and have a discussion about it. And in all fairness to both sides of the boards. This board felt strongly that, if the American Legion wanted to take this thing back because they had made commitments to change the some of the issues that were brought up in the previous year, and they were willing to go out and hire professional management, that because of the long-term relationship that we had with them, that we felt that they deserved another shot at it. And whether you agree with that or not, that was the overall feeling of the county commission. So I hope that this hasn't diminished our ability to work together and see eye to eye on your role. And the last thing I want to see is everyone upset and file a resignation and walk out and say, you guys can just do it yourself. Because that's not what we're all about. But I think you have to understand that, for the most part, a lot of things in county government, kind of the buck stops with the county commission, whether we give the commission, the ability to move forward on stuff. They're, like I said, I can count less than a handful of situations that's occurred over the last 18 years where we've had an actual disagreement with a recommendation coming out or a way to do things. So I just ask you to take that under consideration, that we may not agree on everything, and hopefully we agree on the majority. And I hope that you will not be offended by it, but I think that personally, I think we could have handled it better in terms of coming together and talking about it before we took action. That's just my personal opinion.
I don't feel as a board that we expect you to agree with everything that we do. That's okay that we disagree. I don't have a problem with that. I am less charitable towards, I guess, some of the comments that I read in the press that are aggressive, calling the decision we made a mistake, and saying this is what happens when government oversteps its bounds. And so what I want to do is not set up something where we're like this. I want to set up something where we can have an open dialogue, even if it's heated, even if we disagree, even at the end of the night, if we agree to disagree, we go our separate ways. We are not saying that you don't have the final authority. It's written very clearly in our rules and regulations on the Park and Rec Commission. The last item addresses the procedure for how the Board of Commissioners can overturn a decision that we made. That's fine. That's all set up according to law. That's fine. But we don't need to play this out in the newspapers, and we don't need to accuse us of bad judgment, because I guarantee what we did was not bad judgment. It was different judgment, but it wasn't bad judgment. And I don't appreciate the things that I read in there, and I would ask for your sensitivity to making comments when there are a lot of issues that I feel weren't fully explored.
And I just want to respond to one thing. The discount for the, and again, we need to clarify that the ruling is that we allow them to have a discount on the first year because of their startup costs and their ability to go out and hire management, to give them the ability, you might want to just say a break for starting all over again. And I'm not opposed to that philosophy. You know, if you have a new program coming in and they're going to have to invest a lot of time and money and effort into getting it going and getting it up, giving them a break for 1 year, I'm perfectly fine with that. I mean, I'm just speaking as one person. But that deal was just cut for 1 year. And, you know, in terms of, you know, the half off or the, you know, the cost of the field. So that wasn't an every year deal. So I hope, you know, you'll take that under consideration and when you try to answer everybody else's response, because again, they're not informed. What they may hear is maybe what they don't understand is what actually occurred. And this was just a 1 year shot. We're going to help them get up and going, and after that, they're under the same guidelines and rules as everyone else. So.
Well, in response to you, I don't get the sense that you understand the position that we've been put in.
And that's
from
fair.
From these other
and that's fair. It's a fair.
Very important user groups.
Right.
That have been doing business with County Parks and Recreation for years. I think you've really tied our hands. I'm not exactly sure how we're going to handle this, but we're going to have to work on that. As far as the relationship between the two bodies, I want to reemphasize something that Al said. I got a call from a constituent who happens to live in Mr. Gilman's area, who wanted to point out to me something that's on his blog. And I'll read it to you. The title is, the topic is baseball. And he says, a couple of folks on the Parks Commission seem to have a problem letting go of the American Legion program, baseball program. They would encumber the vets with more contract language than is necessary. We will be meeting with them on the 16th. The county board has the ultimate say, but procedurally we have to endure the attempt to burden the program operators with punitive measures. Stay tuned to this. I'm tuned.
I'll be reporting on it. Okay.
That's no way to develop a cooperative relationship.
Well, and getting back to the what you have to deal with as far as how you have to deal with these people asking for their discounts, you could remind them that they could go through the same process of punishment that the American Legion went through to get that same end result. I don't think that would be appropriate either. And I think that, frankly, Larry probably is a better politician than I am. And he said pretty much what I would say, but in a much friendlier way.
Okay, Commissioner Wheelock, and then
Well,
Commissioner
you know, I
Richardson.
think this whole American Legion thing is just gotten blown out of proportion, and it's bad all the way around. But it was bad a year and a half ago when I had a room full of parents complaining because the American Legion wasn't running the program. They were having problems. They were actually having police cars sent to the Civic Center because the American Legion wasn't taking care of the program either. So a decision was made on a very short term, but at least that decision was made in cooperation with the Parks and Recreation Commission, and discussion and dialogue took place before the decision was made to take it over. Okay, then we come a year later, and all of a sudden, we're going to make the decision to give it back to American Legion without a dialogue with the Parks and Recreation Commission, and without even a dialogue with the American Legion whether or not they were prepared to take the program back. You know, I apologize for the way that happened. It wasn't a unanimous vote, but it is the board's decision, and I will support the board's decision because it's already done. It's a done deal. We can sit here all night and talk about the way that happened, and we can talk about, you know, why it should have been done differently, but the fact is, it's a done deal. We need to move forward from this point forward, but we absolutely have to have a commitment on your part and on our part to communicate better. You know, we talked about communication problems right in the very beginning. Our communication problem has to be better. You know, and it has to be better when the county or the Parks and Recreation Commission but 5 years ago, Jason and Bob and I spent hours meeting with representatives from T-Base because of a situation where T-Base decided that the county park, which we know is the T-Base Keystone Soccer Fields, was T-Base property, and they were not going to allow North Star Soccer to play there. You know, we can't have that. It's county park land. It's got to be available to people throughout the county. So, you know, we've been through this before. We had the discussion with T-Base, and after a lot of hours, we actually kind of got an agreement, and I think it's, at least last time I heard, it was still working. But that's neither here nor there. But the thing about it is we have to communicate better. We can't have this annual thing where I've got commissioners saying, I want $25,000 for Civic Center South. That's Parks and Recreation money. It's money we're spending on recreational development, recreational parks. That money should come through Parks and Recreation as a request. And we shortcut it. We've shortcut it every single time since Ginny Olds brought it to us 10 years ago. Yeah. And, you know, I can still hear Ginny screaming at me because I said no, it has to go to Parks and Rec. But that's the argument I've made every time, but the money has still been given.
All right, Commissioner Richardson.
Well, I'd hate to rehash the whole American Legion thing, but evidently that's what we're going to do, so.
Yeah,
I might
yeah.
as well.
Jump
I
in.
might as well throw my piece in here too.
You have the floor.
First of all, I did not vote to give the program back to the American Legion, not because I didn't think American Legion should run it. First of all, I wasn't even sure. I'm talking about this year. I wasn't even sure if they wanted to run it. It wasn't clear to me, even after we took the vote, that they wanted to do it. But I voted that way because it was your responsibility to make that decision, and they should have dealt with you. I mean, at the point that we were voting on it, no formal request had even been made, as far as I know, to the Parks and Rec Commission to say, gee, we'd like to take the program back. Going back to the year before, when, again, as Sonny said, all the angry parents came and said, we're tearing our hair, you know, we don't trust what's going on, we have problems, whatever. This is the end of February in 2010, and we didn't know, is there going to be a baseball program? That was one of the hardest votes I've had. I voted to let the county establish a program because, again, American Legion, I wasn't sure they even wanted it, and they certainly didn't seem prepared to take it on. Again, I'm thinking like, you know, let's not trash the whole youth baseball season because the adults can't decide who's in charge. And the reason I voted then to say, okay, let Parks and Rec take it over is because Parks and Rec had trained people and resources to put a program together on very short notice and, you know, and go ahead and do it. And now that, again, the county commission has voted to give it back to you folks, I certainly think that you should be able to work out the details, you know, with American Legion, and I hope you will.
Anyone else wish to speak on this item? Commissioner Venture?
Yeah, I'll touch on it, I guess.
Okay.
Thank you. I'll admit to encouraging this process to be rushed. And I had a political reason for that, and that reason was confirmed when I saw that contract that reportedly is the contract that is standard for all sporting organizations in the county and even in the state, is what I was told. And then come to find out, well, the rest of the organizations don't really have a contract, or they have something really brief or something totally different. I feel there's a very passive-aggressive resistance to the American Legion taking the fields. And I admit to rushing it because we'd still be talking about it if we tried to follow the proper process. And instead of the American Legion gearing up right now, having had meetings weeks ago on what this season's going to be and how they're going to organize it, we'd still be thinking about who's going to run it this year. And I felt like the process was trying to be dragged on and on to the point where, well, it's too late for them to start this year, maybe next year. And I just felt like that was just going to be an effect to try and just take the wind out of their sails to the point where they couldn't muster a program with what they had. So I'm sorry you take offense to that, but I'll just dump my cards on the table and say that's where I'm coming from. I felt, and I ran on the position that when an organization is willing to voluntarily run a program, we should let them do it. And quite possibly I wasn't apprised to all the facts that you guys were. That's quite possible. Unfortunately, a lot of the public's information comes from local media sources that tend to be provocative rather than formative.
Mr. Chairman, I just want to repeat, I personally am committed to doing everything I can to help the American Legion have a successful program. I would ask, though, while we're on this topic, that we reach some kind of an agreement as to how this resolution in the bylaws works. The way I read it is you guys have, there's a lot of power vested in our body, in this resolution and in these bylaws. Mr. Cooney, I've heard him 3 or 4 times explain how he sees this work. There are some breaks that are in there. And one is that you get to appoint people on this board. Another is that there are elected and appointed other commission officials, like the road commission is here. They're involved in politics to some degree too, so I guess the theory there is that they'll slow us crazy citizens down a little bit if need be. And then the very last thing is the clause at the very end of the thing, which gives you the power, with a little bit of a procedure here, to an action shall not be reconsidered by the County Board of Commissioners unless a request for such review is made in writing by 3 supervisors. In such case, the item shall be placed on the agenda. So it's an action that can be undone. And that's kind of my point, is we heard you, okay, it's the American Legion, but it's the additional contract language that you threw into that. And that's where I think you're stepping on their toes, to be very specific.
Okay. All right, we're still with the county commission. Herb?
Yeah, I think possibly one of the solutions that you as the Park and Recreation Commission could do is go back to the commission and say, if you feel so strongly about that particular issue and you want to set that in your contract, then you take it out of our budget and set it out of yours. I know I'm not sitting very well with any of our fellow commissioners, but we set the stage. We created the problem. We did the same thing with the South Civic Center. We stepped outside of you, and it could be a way to take away your problem trying to deal with the other organizations. That you can't expect, it's an unfunded mandate. We all complain about unfunded mandates from the county and the state government. We just did it to you. Now, how are you going to handle it? And so I think that's one of the things we may have to look at. How do you come back to us and say, you did an unfunded mandate, now how are you going to want to fix it? Just a thought.
All right. Any other?
May not be popular.
We're still on the topic of the structure.
Oh.
Are, believe it or
are
not.
we?
But we're ready to bleed right into that American Legion
Well,
topic.
let me just
Go
touch
ahead, Commissioner Max Bauer.
on maybe a little bit of both. Part of the problem, I think, in communication is oftentimes I'm not, or I shouldn't say oftentimes, sometimes I'm not included in the discussion. Now, granted, I was not available in December and I was in the hospital in January, so for a period of time I was not available. But the first time I heard about the American Legion, the suggested contract was at the January Parks and Rec Commission meeting. And I had just gotten out of the hospital. I was not well. And I have to tell you, I was shocked. When I heard what Jason was saying about that American Legion contract, my jaw dropped. And I questioned it. I said, this I don't believe is the intent of the county board. And I cited specific, I don't know if I cited it at that meeting specifically, but what came to mind, I think I did say it, was the part of the contract that talked about a survey should be were going to require a survey of all the participants in the baseball program, and I had heard Commissioner Fleece specifically state that that was not what he wanted in a baseball contract. So after that meeting, I called Mr. Cooney, and I said, you know, clearly you're working on this contract, because I had heard Jason and commissioners say that Mr. Cooney was working on this contract, and he said, well, I've almost got it wrapped up, I'll email it to you. And in our conversation, and Mr. Cooney, I'm sure will confirm this, he said, he said, what particularly do you have a problem with? And I said, well, it's, he said, is it the 1 year? And I said, how perceptive you are. I said, yes. You know, I don't believe that that's the intent of the county board. And Mr. Cooney said, well, weren't you a part of the discussion? And I said, no. You know, I think part of the and I'm not going to necessarily speak for the county board on the Parks Commission. I can't do that without a vote. But what I can do is communicate with the Parks Commission what I heard Commissioner Fleece say, what I've heard Commissioner Henschel say, what I've heard Commissioner Inman say. I can communicate that because I attend all these meetings, and I understand that you don't. And clearly, I don't expect you to watch all of our meetings. But if I were included a little bit more, I think the communication would be better.
Well, I think we need to make a distinction here, and that is with this, Mr. Chairman, you might want to address that so everybody clearly understands that somebody sent over a list of items for consideration to see if they would be appropriate or not in a contract, and they weren't expecting a contract to come back. I don't know if it's true or not, and that the Parks and Rec Commission was not aware that a preliminary contract with those items were being prepared, and that's how, you know, the county commission ended up getting a copy of something you had not even addressed or discussed. So, you know, we can redress that. I just want to make sure that, you know, whatever occurred in that situation, you know, we might want to think about, you know, a future protocol in terms of, you know, if you're going to send something over to Bob Cooney, you have to make a distinction whether if you want his opinion or you want him to prepare a contract. And if you do, you need to send that back to the Parks and Rec Commission for discussion before, you know, because, you know, it's hard, it would be unfair, in my opinion, for us to criticize you for something you have not even seen or talked about. So if I understand how that whole thing worked, if I don't understand how that whole thing came about, then I apologize. But you know, I guess we both, on both sides, we can kind of learn from that experience that, you know, the appearance of all these issues in a contract, from what I understand, was not specifically directed. Is that true or not true?
That's true. It was not our intent at that stage to have a contract drawn up. Commissioners Doran, Jason Jones, and I got together in the interest of expediting it for the time to respond to a request from Mark Greiner to provide them with a contract. So we came up with some terms not intended to be punitive whatsoever. Honestly, I wore the uniform of the military for 24 years. When the commander tells you what to do, you salute sharply and you press ahead and you do it. This was nothing about that, but the county is involved in the American Legion baseball program. This is not a private organization that is just running its little program completely separate from the county. We're subsidizing them to a very high degree, and so if something happens in there and liability becomes an issue, I guarantee that the county will be showing up at court to address that. And so we were simply putting in what we felt were appropriate protections for the county to ensure that the program runs smoothly. There was no attempt whatsoever to punish the American Legion or anything like that. We were actually trying to ensure, we had difficulties with them clearly in our communications with on our expectations for what the program should be. And so because of that, we felt a contract was appropriate. They requested a contract. We laid down the terms that would help us meet their needs, and we put some terms in there that we felt were absolute minimalist standards for what they needed to do to meet our needs, to include the background checks. 1 year felt appropriate, and based on the fact that it had not been a successful program recently. That's how that came about. The actual contract that Mr. Cooney made up was premature to what we were ready for.
So any event, is there any other more discussion about the board's relationship with Parks and Rec?
Yeah, I guess my question is, getting back to the board structure, do you feel comfortable with the way the structure is set up today? Is there something that you would change in that structure that you would like us to talk about from the point of view of the Parks and Recreation?
I don't have a problem with what's written in the rules and regulations, and in accordance with the resolution that was passed last April. We have responsibilities. There's a procedure for you to overturn us. We're fine with that. Arguing about the terms of a contract that hasn't been written yet is probably not in accordance with that policy. That's our point.
Well, I don't want to lay Bob out on this thing. I mean, obviously, he felt he got direction to put the items into a contract and as a draft, and then you guys could discuss it. So I don't want to lay him out on this thing. I mean, actually, obviously, he thought he had direction to do that. So, go ahead.
My memory of this is that I received a list of terms in an email from Jason. If the Parks Commission wanted to include in the contract, among those were 3 items requested by the Board of Commissioners at their meeting, where the decision was made to give the program back to American Legion. And I think my understanding at that time was that they wanted a contract. I don't know whether it was from a phone call that accompanied the email or what. But my understanding was that this was something that needed to be put together fast because the baseball season is coming up and American Legion needs to have their ducks in line. We need to know what's going on. I remember when I went back and looked at the email, the question came up, was I supposed to draft a contract at all? It didn't specifically say that. It said to review and comment on whether these terms made sense.
expect him to do, you know, put in language to protect us. So what he said here is exactly what he does for us in other countries.
And the other thing that I had in the back of my mind was the problems that we had with T-Bays and the Parks and Rec organization. Back about the time, I think that was about a year before we had the fall of the American Legion. But you know, it was very huge concern that we had this contract with the T-Bays organization that goes out to 2025 and really limited our ability to deal with those folks when things went badly. And I told Commissioner Maxwell when she called me that was, you know, I had said I thought a one-year contract made sense because if things don't work well, we all hope they do, but if they don't, then we can walk away from things. So that helps.
All right, Commissioner Maxbauer and then Commissioner Gilman.
Well, I did want to say that when I did speak with Mr. Cooney, he did indicate that he'd been directed by Jason to write a contract. And we had not had this discussion at the Parks Commission yet, whether or not we even wanted a contract. And so I was surprised. And quite honestly, it is my feeling that after I read that contract, I felt that we were singling out the American Legion and basically punishing them for some unknown reason. And I say this because when you take a look at the Friends of Ice contract, they actually they collect revenue. They do all the scheduling. They do the maintenance. T-Base does the same thing. They collect revenue. You know, when they have organized coaching events on the soccer facility, they collect revenue for that. But in return, you know, they maintain the fields. All we're doing with American Legion is the same thing we do with the YMCA, the same thing that we do with Breakers, the same thing that we do with rugby. Those people are not required to have a contract. So please explain to me why American Legion is somehow singled out and they're treated differently than all those organizations when they are not maintaining the fields, like T-Base and like Friends of Ice.
Well, let me ask you a
maintains the hockey.
question. Do they pay actual costs? The YMCA,
Yes.
they pay actual costs.
No, excuse me, they pay our published costs.
Is that actual cost?
No.
But in answer to your question, I think Mr. Cooney just explained the reasons for this particular agreement.
$25,000. $10,000 for the equipment, $10,000 for giving and half the cost of the maintenance for the field system.
Yeah,
If we're giving them $25,000, we have to have a contract in place to give it to them.
Yeah. Commissioner Gilman.
Yeah, just, I think the Parks Commission has extended it an olive branch. I don't personally like the idea of having to, you know, somebody we're renting fields to have to do a survey afterwards. Are you happy? Are you kids happy? Why do we care? It's up to them to care. But that's your job. It's your contract.
Can I respond just to that one point? Because I found it interesting. I spent a lot of time last weekend going through all of the meetings, watching a lot of videos with all the American Legion stuff that went on. The first time that a customer survey was mentioned, it was mentioned by Mark Greiner. When the county, when the vote was taken at the county, when the Parks and Recreation Commission made the decision to the county-run program, he very graciously said, we'd like to help you in any way, and I want to encourage you to run some sort of a survey so you don't get into the same problems we do. So I don't think a survey is all that onerous of a thing to ask, particularly when it was his idea in the first place.
And we did it too.
All right,
Yeah,
Commissioner.
we did it.
At the end of the year, we took a survey.
And that's great, and
Commissioner Henschel.
I certainly appreciate everything you've done. But by putting in that contract and the wording of that contract such that if they fail to do it, they could lose the whole program. That was all the stuff in that contract that, yeah, it was good ideas, but to put conditions, if they don't maintain a phone line, if they're a day late paying their rent, all these things that it could just blow away, because that was the conditions in the contract.
Well, but, I mean, I think the rent issue, for example, was put in there because they were more than a year delinquent in paying the rent.
Yeah.
There was a reason for it, and I think a legitimate reason. And I think what's important here, we're losing kind of focus on this. One thing that should have occurred that didn't occur, in my opinion, was whenever a draft contract was written, it should have been allowed to go through the proper procedure, which was a discussion of it at the Parks Board, where Commissioner Maxbauer, you sit, and you, I'm sure, would have conveyed concerns that you thought
I would
commissioners
have,
would
but there was no discussion. I was just told that Mr. Cooney was drafting a contract.
But all that he did was give you an update that there was these were some terms they were considering, and it was gonna clearly have to come back to the Parks Board, because the bylaws say the Parks Board has to approve a contract. And what happened was, in effect, we circumvented that. We didn't let the Parks Board have a chance to look over a contract. That contract, when it got approved, might have looked much different than what Mr. Cooney drafted.
And I want to address the fact that the American Legion was a year late in a payment, because I met with the American Legion a number of times in the fall, and I brought it to meetings saying they have not received their invoice. They have not received their invoice. You know, it's not anyone's fault
Well, it is, because
that they did not receive an invoice,
they were
Dennis.
told-
They
they were-
can't pay what they don't know they owe.
Commissioner, they were told what the billing was, and at the time, it was Mr. Butcher who said, we're not paying that, that's not the amount, those are not correct, that is not correct information. Mr. Griner and the rest of them had nothing else to do with it. It was, everything was done through Mr. Butcher. And so that
Including
was.
dispatching the police.
Pardon?
Including dispatching the police.
Well, including not sharing with, and I think some of you will remember this, including not sharing with the other board members of the American Legion baseball program what the revenues of the program were. The other members of the board that this board appointed couldn't even get information, according to Mr. Swaggart and Mr. Lerchen, of what revenues were in the program. So, you know, that was all done through Mr. Am I wrong on that, Jason? I believe it was done through Mr. Butcher, and he said, I'm not going to pay that. And then we got into this whole turmoil of the thing, and you know, and that's where it fell apart. But you know, I just think it would have made sense for the Parks Board to be allowed to given a chance to do their job and review any proposed contract. And I'm very confident that you would have conveyed your concerns at that time, and that contract may have looked different and may or may not have been acceptable. But it was the second time we really short-stopped the bylaws. And that was just something that I think shouldn't have happened.
Dennis, you're talking about the American Legion not revealing what their revenues are. Do we get annual reports from Friends of Ice on the Hall Arena and T-Base
No,
from
the
theirs?
difference is this. We appointed the American Legion Baseball Program Board, and the American Legion Baseball Program Board was coming to us and saying, we cannot see the revenues for the program. And we even brought it up in a meeting and said, you owe us money from last year. And they said, we don't have any idea whether there's any money there. That's all controlled by one individual, and he does not share with the county board appointed board what the revenues of the program are. So there was very good reason why we didn't know. And it was our board who came to us and complained.
Commissioner Henschel.
Thank you. You know, this issue of a delinquent debt keeps coming up, and I grew up in business. When someone owes you money, you send them a statement every month. And from my understanding, what I've been told is January of 2010, those statements stopped being sent. Okay, and maybe there was some confusion there, but who ordered they stop being sent, or is there some rule somewhere that applied in the situation where you stopped sending them? Who was the delinquent here?
I don't know.
That falls on you, Dennis.
You know? Pardon?
That falls on you, because you're running the county. right?
All right,
And the
well,
people
then-
you appoint.
And the people I appoint, yes, that's correct.
So was there a disciplinary action
I
on
will
record?
I will take, well, you can review that and determine whether there's a disciplinary action that should take place. And I will take responsibility for that if they were not sent.
And that's all I'm saying, is because you keep pointing the finger, American Legion was delinquent. Well, you know what? You didn't send a statement, and
Well,
that's
we
standard
sent- How many
practice.
statements did we send, Jason?
2 or 3.
Okay, so statements were sent.
And you went a year without sending them, and now you're saying they're a year delinquent.
Well, let's be practical about this. How would the county commission have felt if we would have sent this to a collection agency to go collect from American Legion? I imagine there'd be some commissioners pretty upset with us if we did that.
Yeah.
In fact, I know we would. I know they would.
I'm not suggesting that, I just said send a statement.
You sent 3 of them.
Right.
We sent statements from the end of the baseball season in 2009 through the end of the first of the year.
Yep, and then there was some
2000.
discussions about
And then
compensating with
Then we took over
equipment.
the program.
And you just stopped
part
sending
of-
statements, so what are they supposed to think?
Excuse me, I think. Part of the discussion at the time we took over the program was we were going to credit them toward their delinquent bill for some of that equipment
Yes,
that we
that's right.
purchased.
That's right.
You know, and I don't know exactly how the dollars and cents worked out, but I know that another thing that we need to remember is that not all of the equipment that we just recently gave to American Legion was that used equipment that we got from
Oh my
American
gosh, no.
Legion. Because
No,
we
no, no.
purchased a great deal of new safety equipment that we, the Grand Traverse County Board, authorized the expenditure for that equipment.
Yeah.
And
It's
we
not-
just gave it away.
It is not as if we just stopped sending bills and stopped dealing with the issue. That's the point where the county had to take over the program, and we went and I met with Mark Reiner, and I said, Mark, he said, what should we do with the money we have left in the program? And I said, well, the first thing is we need to rectify what equipment we want to buy from you. Okay? Now, my understanding was when we went there for the equipment, they thought the value of the equipment was quite considerably more than what we thought the value of the equipment was. And in fact, we ended up using only a small portion of the equipment. We bought the pitching cages, or the pitching machines, and we bought, I think, some catching equipment, but most of the equipment was what we consider to be inappropriate and unsafe. And that's when we spent how much money on new equipment?
$10,000.
$10,000 on new equipment.
So did they get an
So there was a
adjusted-
process in January and February and March when we were starting up the program that we did not collect money from them or did not get the back rent, but we were still trying to work out this negotiation of what we were going to do with the equipment, and there was going to be money exchanged in that regard. The other thing that I talked to Mark Reiner about that he was real interested in, he said, well, what do we do with the money we have left? And I suggested to him at a board meeting that it might be appropriate to use that money to set up a scholarship fund for those individuals who could not pay the full amount. And Mark thought that was a great idea and was going to look into that. I never heard anything more about where that went. So, yep, once we took over the program, we did stop. And once we weren't able to negotiate terms of transferring equipment, I think we did stop at that point, and we never pursued it further until.
So you never
now.
gave them an adjusted bill, and yet today you say they have a delinquent account. That's my point.
Well,
It's
no,
not
they don't
fair to
have
them.
They don't have a delinquent account.
Well,
because
up to
you
the
took
point
action
when,
not
up to the
for
point when we
account.
did that, you brought up in that meeting that they have a delinquent account, and yet
Yep.
you never gave them an adjusted bill to say, look, this is what we think it's worth. You never followed through. And I don't think it's fair to them to say at a public meeting that the American Legion had a one-year delinquent account, make them sound like they don't pay their bills, when they weren't billed properly.
Well, let's be honest about it. The season ended in when? What time of the year does the season end?
July 30th.
July 31st, and they were sent 3 bills into the end of that year. They didn't pay the bill. After July 31st, that would be 5 months. They didn't pay the bill. So I'm sorry if I said the wrong thing, but in my mind, they were delinquent. They received 3 bills. They had 5 months. They didn't pay.
All right. Which leads us into the American Legion contract.
Mr. Chairman, we did.
I think we've hit that one out of the ballpark.
And I think just the remaining part of this is that we're gonna have you guys working with the American Legion to something that both parties can agree to and move forward. Is that the plan?
Yeah, we're gonna do that. I guess there's not much we can do to convince those of you who think the American Legion's being picked on, that they're not. Other than, I guess you watch us. What I'm more concerned, and I don't mean to take you backwards.
Right.
How's this going to work in the future? I'm really interested in our collective understanding of the resolution that creates this body, and maybe even the state law that it's based on. Is my understanding correct?
Well, you want me to address that?
Sure.
Okay. The way I read the state law that establishes the Parks Commission, it creates a fairly autonomous body, or that's the intent. Okay. I mean, if you look at the powers that a Parks Commission can have, power to purchase property, sell property, the power of condemnation. It's envisioning a fairly autonomous body. That's not quite what we have. Prior to last spring, when we did an overhaul of that resolution 42 from Resolution 42 of 1977, it wasn't clear exactly what authority the Parks Commission had, because what the resolution said is that any policy decision must go to the Board of Commissioners, and that was in the context of policy decisions, purchase of property, and there's one other item there that it sure sounded like it meant to be important policy decisions, okay? But policy decisions are the day-to-day decisions that all boards, Parks Commission, Board of Commissioners, the decisions that you make, okay? I think it was an inartfully worded resolution, but before last spring, I was constantly getting questions about, well, the Parks Commission just made this decision, does that have to go to the Board of Commissioners? And I looked at the resolution and I always say yes, because it's a matter of policy. And I don't think that that was the intent of the Board of Commissioners when they drafted 4277, based on the way that the state law reads. And I don't think, even in the context of that resolution, that interpretation made sense. That resolution was clearly out of date. 3 of the members of the commission were supposed to be now defunct county officials, such as the 4-H Camp Commission representative, okay, or the Marion Island County Commission representative. We don't have those representatives. And so we knew the resolution had to be redrafted. And I had 2 concerns. One was that it seemed to me, after attending several Parks Commission meetings, that, and this might not be true, but it seemed to be a system where the Parks Commission figured, well, our decisions aren't final. It's always going to go to the Board of Commissioners to review. So we don't have to be real careful with our decision making. I'm not saying that's what the commissioners were doing at the time. I'm just saying it seemed to create that kind of a system where pass the buck, the Board of Commissioners will figure this out. Same thing with the Board of Commissioners. Well, the Parks Commission must have very thoughtfully considered this issue, so we're just going to go ahead and approve that without taking a real close look at it. That's what I was afraid might be going on when you take all decisions and they have to be approved by the Board of Commissioners. And I brought those concerns up at the time, and I think the board must have agreed with that, because we passed a new resolution. And that resolution gives the Parks Commission all of the same authorities that the state statute allows the Parks Commission to have, but it has one added proviso, and that is that if 3 county commissioners want to revisit an action of the Parks Commission, they can do that. Now that's under the Board of Commissioners' authority to pass rules and regulations Parks Commission, okay? And I think they have the authority to do that, okay? It seemed to me at the time a compromise between saying Parks Commission, go out, do whatever you want, we'll just, we have the power to purse strings, we can always not approve an item in the budget, okay? And the other alternative was, which is what we had, and that was all decisions of the Parks Commission going to the Board of Commissioners. I don't think the Board of Commissioners wanted all those decisions coming to them either. So that's what we have, is we have a Parks Commission that has all the authorities allowed under state law, but the Board of Commissioners can revisit those decisions. So I'm not sure if that completely answers the question, what is the relationship here? I think what...
It does for me.
All right. Commissioner Lemon?
And I think maybe one of those things that we may want to do, add into that, is just because you have 3 commissioners call about a motion, but also maybe some sort of language in there that says the 2 chairmen should be forced to sit down, call a joint meeting together to talk about the problem issue. Because then you start to, you force the issue of the communication.
Not at the point of the 3 commissioners request, at the point of the county board is willing to make a decision or overturn it, that discussion should happen.
Well, the discussion should happen with both boards at the table, rather than just a forced issue. You're going to tell us what to do, and we're going to tell you what to do, and then we got this.
I think what Sonny's saying is that if 3 commissioners want to call a meeting for discussion, the result of the meeting is if there is conflict, then we can schedule a joint meeting.
Right. Exactly.
Okay.
That's a good idea.
Yes.
Yeah.
All right. I'm sorry, Jason, did you have something?
I forgot. I didn't finish.
I'm sorry. All right, Commissioner Maxwell and Commissioner Wheelock.
Okay, well, Commissioner Dwyer, you backed up to the role between the two boards. I'm going to move it forward a little bit to the American Legion contract again.
Go for it.
Please tell me, are we going to require the same standards for the YMCA, background checks for the employees, the coaches that are working with kids or whatever? Are we going to require the same types of contracts with the breakers? Are we going to require the same kind of background checks when coaches come in and do junior football practice or a rugby game on our fields? If you tell me that we are going to be treating everyone the same, then I would agree with you. We're not singling out the American Legion, but the fact is we do not treat everyone the same. And in my opinion, again, we are singling out the American Legion. We are making an exception of them for some reason.
Well, like I said, I don't think we're going to convince you otherwise. I think what I would ask is, each of these sports and each of these outside organizations that we deal with are different. And I think we've got to have counsel. We've got to have the advice of counsel as to what goes into those contracts and what doesn't. I think we have to strive to be fair to everybody, and I think we do that. I guess the proof's going to be in the pudding. I think maybe what we ought to do is try to work this through with the American Legion and see how it goes. We're kind of hamstrung right now because of the terms of the contract that got blurted out at a Board of Commission meeting.
We haven't looked at it yet. And so
I know.
Yeah. So,
but I was told that, well, never mind.
So we need to discuss it at the Merrill meeting.
Okay, so it's like Parks has got a job to do.
All right. And yes,
I had one of our commissioners who's not here wanted me to ask at this point if the conversation went this way. Bob, can you compare the role according to our rules and regulations, can you compare the Parks and Recreation's role to the Board of Commissioners to some other county appointed board? Who does our board function most of? Is it like road commission, like commission on aging?
Not like the road commission, which is fairly autonomous. The only Parks is probably most similar to the Board of Public Works. The county has general control over both of those boards, but the immediate control is vested in a separate commission.
So we're unlike Commission on Aging, unlike Road
Commission on
unlike-
Aging isn't created under any statute. There are commissions that are, but ours is not. So all decisions made by the Commission on Aging are really decisions that should go back to the Board of Commissioners.
And do.
Commissioner Wheelock.
Well, I guess, as we sit here and we talk about the American Legion contract, I'm not adversarial against the contract. I'm just concerned that we use this as a stepping stone to create contracts with our other user groups. I do believe that, any organization that is collecting money to operate a program on county-owned park property should have a contract with the county. So I believe that rather than pointing a finger and saying that the American Legion contract is bad, I think we should be saying this is the first step, but we will have contracts with all of these organizations that are operating on our land. When someone rents this building, they sign a rental agreement. We need to have a contract with these organizations. It's one thing if you stop at the Civic Center or you stop at T-Base Field and you do a pickup game. That's one thing. But if you're running an organized, scheduled program where you're going to be here, 3 nights a week or whatever it is, then you need a contract with the county. And I don't care whether we're talking about Breakers Swim Club, whether we're talking about the high school swim team, whether we're talking about rugby, whether we're talking about YMCA softball. If they're going to use county land to run a program for a large number of kids that they're collecting a fee for, they need a contract.
It's always frightening when you agree.
It scares the hell out of me.
I do agree with that, Commissioner Wheelock, and I'm supportive of that, and we will work towards that. And the contracts have evolved over many, many years. Some of them are quite old. We don't have a consistent policy in how we apply that. We don't have a consistent execution of that non-policy.
Labor contract someday? You think yours don't match?
So yes, we intend to move in that direction, and but we'll have to talk about that as a commission as well.
So let's take care of item G.
Sure. Beat that to death.
Now, any other discussion on the American Legion contract? All right, okay, we beat that pretty well. Proposal of a joint annual meeting. I think that was thrown out there as a means to have just ongoing communication and dialogue and understanding of philosophy. And, from time to time we do have joint meetings with other boards and commissions. And so we have a suggestion from at least the representatives from Parks and Rec at that agenda setting meeting that we had that, let's meet on maybe next year or whatever. I mean, or as needed. If you feel or we feel that we have some additional philosophy conflicts, and we'll get together.
I don't think we should spend time at a meeting unnecessarily, but I think if there is a conflict or perceived potential conflict, then having a joint meeting would really be good.
All right. Commissioner Richardson.
I know this is really premature, but I wouldn't mind talking about a joint meeting maybe November, early December. We will have been through this whole baseball thing for the summer. Things will have calmed down and maybe get a better idea where we're all going together. Plus which, I know there were some members of the Park Commission who wanted to be here but couldn't because of other commitments.
All right.
So.
Okay, good. Commissioner Wheelock.
I think it's important that if we have conflicts, that we have the joint meeting, we have the discussion. But, the other place that I think we need input from the Parks Commission is as we draft the budget for 2012, and we talk about where we're spending recreational money. We're going to be looking at really tight budgets. We have been and we're going to continue to be. And the fact is, we're going to have to evaluate what we're doing in all of our departments, and that's going to include Parks and Recreation. What are we getting for the dollar? We got to make sure we're getting our bang for the money, because We cannot continue to put money into programs that aren't being perceived well, aren't being run well, and are not affecting a number of people. You know, we had a discussion 6 months ago, probably a little longer than that now, but about a program that MSU Extension had where they needed $68,000. Well, you know, we figured out we'd come up with $68,000. But then when you actually pin it down, it involves 36 families. $68,000 for 36 families is a pretty rich program. You know, so, you know, if I'm going to talk about when I want to hear, you know, want to have an opportunity to hear from the Parks and Recreation Commission, one very important time is when we're drawing our budget.
Commissioner Max Bauer, and then Commissioner Lundquist.
Well, I feel that the need to mention that I voted no on that $68,000 expenditure, which doesn't surprise anyone.
We could probably
But-
spend 15 minutes on that if you want to talk about that.
No,
I don't think that's
no,
what
all
we're
right.
gonna do.
No, I just wanted to agree once again with Commissioner Wheelock. We have got limited dollars, and we have to put those limited dollars where they're going to do the most benefit. And every department is going to be looked at this year.
Commissioner
In that
Lundquist.
way.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a comment. You brought up the Commission on Aging. Our commission had a major problem with the Commission on Aging when they were building their garage. And we were all upset, and we finally decided that we need to bring together on a yearly basis a meeting between the Commission on Aging and our commission. So you're not being selected as a separate organization that we're not happy with. So, you know, we've had the past, and we've worked out the issues, and I think we can continue to work out these issues and make your board stronger and make our community more receptive and a better quality community for what we're trying to do.
All right. Okay, that leads us into the last item that was discussed at our joint meeting, and that was presenting a future situation. And I know that, you know, we're a 2-year board, and could be someone else sitting there 2 years later, and 2 years from there, and 2 years from there. They might have a different philosophy, but this is more of a kind of a longer range discussion, but the chairman had brought up the issue. You know, what happens when all these volunteer groups get tired and they don't have any more volunteers to help, and there's no one left to run the programs, and they come to the county and say, you know, we have any, you know, we just can't find the volunteer help anymore. Would you be willing to take it over? I mean, what would be the position at that time? And again, we have different philosophies going back and forth on this issue, and I'm not sure we can address it in its full form tonight, but it is a question that they brought up, and it's probably going to be if the situation does occur, I guess during our tenure, I mean, that would just cause us to come together again. But I don't know much more to say about that than what's been said, but anybody on your side or our side have any other additional comments on that? Commissioner Henschel and then Commissioner Lundquist.
Yeah, there's a lot of sports out there that just aren't popular here. You know, cricket. I actually heard there is a cricket team starting, but before that, why didn't we have a county cricket team? Because people weren't interested in it. And you know, I think baseball is a great sport, but it's not a sacred cow. And when we get down to if baseball declines in popularity to the point where there's 30 kids in the whole county that want to play it, we are not going to provide the baseball program for 30 kids. We'll do what, you know, if maybe you know, cricket picks up. We'll build some cricket fields and say, you got an organization that wants to run a cricket program, there you go. Provide the facilities to enable the public to create the programs. I don't think we should be trying to pick winners when it comes to programs. And when it gets to the point where there's not enough volunteers or interest to run a program, well, let's look at what else is happening. Maybe it's soccer.
Rifle range.
There we go.
Excuse me. There you go. Okay, yes.
With the tendency is for people on the lower end of the income scale to sometimes have to work 2 jobs. And when they do that, they can't volunteer then and spend their timely value time with their kids. And so in situations like that, they have the kids that have needs to be met, but the parents don't have that leisure time to be a volunteer. In situations like that, then you have to provide those kind of programs if we want to provide for our youth to be able to function as they become adults. And so that's a situation where there may be kids, but their parents frequently are busy working 2 jobs just to stand still.
Any other comments on that issue?
The only thing I would say to answer the question that came up is, how would you handle it? I would hope that you would handle it collaboratively. That if an organization wasn't able to provide the quality of the program, that they would come to you and say, we need your help. And what kind of help do you need? We ask, what's the help that you need to be able to make this program start? Rather than just saying, well, we'll just take you over. Well, they may ask you to take it over.
It wasn't done that way.
But I think that it's one of those things that it's perception that you just took it over. So, and I'm concerned about that perception. And so then I would hope that if some an organization came to you and said, we need help, that you would be able to say, what area and how can we help you and how can we make it stronger? What can we do to provide better services for our community? That's the key. I think the collaborative opportunity there would open that door and say, yes, we can help, but then what is the cost? What are we going to get out of it? And what is the taxpayer going to put into it? And how much of the taxpayer is going to be able to afford to be able to put in at that particular time for that particular program?
Yeah. One of the things Jason is doing is trying to collaborate with the schools and with the city in order to make sure that we have efficient use, but also provide that placemaking element, programs that make this an inviting place for people to come and live and raise their families.
It was nice to see the school systems at that seminar, and I think it opened their eyes and opened their ability to be able to sit down and talk too. And I think that's really important. Jason really did a nice job in opening that door to let them come into it and be able to provide an opportunity for us to be able to use. I mean, they got some great facilities.
And
We're not using them.
They're looking for some help.
Oh, yeah, they are.
I think that's going to be on there pretty
Huge.
quickly.
Yep.
Okay. Does that conclude the discussion under all these items? All right. Moving on to public comment. Ralph?
I have a half-hour presentation.
That's okay, I've got an 8 o'clock meeting here in the morning. I'll be
Yeah. As does Commissioner Thomas, he can sleep here tonight.
First of all, I'm a user, particularly of the Civic Center. I don't know how many pairs of tennis shoes that I've worn out over there walking, and the games and all the other stuff, so I really appreciate that particular part of that in my ear. And the other thing is that I am on the baseball court. Sometimes you open your mouth and get yourself into trouble. And I can tell you that we have got a good board and we have structure, and we do know how much money is there. And I don't want to get into that. We've kind of taken a position that's behind us. We want to build on the future. And I'm glad to hear that you want to cooperate and you want to do everything you can to make this, because this isn't just us. It's the kids that we're interested in. I know you're interested in the kids that are playing those games. The other side of that is that another thing I want to talk about, I was glad to hear, is that I have, since I've been here, I have believed that we need partnership in Parks and Recreation. And I think you did, Anna, you brought it up about, or somebody did, why everybody's buying a whole number of lawnmowers and trucks and all that stuff, and it's ridiculous. So I'm hoping, I heard that that you're moving ahead on that, and you're meeting with the schools. When I was on a school board, I asked the same question, why aren't we doing more of these partnerships? Why are we duplicating all this equipment? So that's what I'm here for. I want to talk about that and say that I think that's great, and hope to continue that on. Because I think Sonny or somebody said, $3 million in the Parks and Recreation. That's an awful lot of money, of course, and it's necessary to have the quality of life in our community. I want to wish you well, and I hope that we get all this stuff straightened out. I learned a lot about contracts.
All right.
I've got a little public comment.
Sure. Could you hold for a second? Sir, do you have a public comment?
No.
Okay. All right, Commissioner Mansell.
All right, I just wanted to let everyone know that I attended the joint meeting with the City Commission and the City Parks and Rec Commission. And I have to tell you, what they've done is absolutely unbelievable. They have raised $1.3 million in grants for the Bayfront, the changes of the Bayfront, For phase one, they only need 1.6 million. So they're just $300,000 shy for phase one, and they plan on breaking ground this fall. The city Parks and Rec board has prioritized the work. They have identified funding. There is just to let everyone know, there is a public meeting for a special meeting of the Parks and Rec Commission March 17th at 6:30 p.m. here at the Governmental Center on the second floor. And they have applied for 4 grants. Land and Water Conservation Fund grant, a Recreation Passport Program grant, a Waterways grant, and a Michigan Natural Resources Trust Fund grant. And I have to tell you, that board is just, I just think they're doing an outstanding job, and I just wanted to call everyone's attention to that.
All right, is there any other public comment?
Just one comment, I got the Government Matters magazine, and they talk about Alabama issues Passport to Fitness. The new program benefits health and economic development across the state. That's where we ought to be going. I'll leave this with you so that you can have that. But I just think that, there's not, we all talk about obesity in our community and how we get people out and start recreating. And even our county as a wellness committee are starting to say, let's look at how do we provide walking trails for our employees that are already marked for 1-mile trails around our buildings. We can do that. We can do that for our community. We can let our community know, hey, if you want to go walk someplace, here's the place to go to do it, and it's a safe environment, and it can tell you the mileage. So we just got to start working our way to making it a healthier community.
Well, Herb, I just, on the issue of obesity,
I mean,
yeah, I just want to let you know I've gained 40 pounds in the last 18 years being on this county committee.
Yeah, but you
won't
lost
talk
that
about
many.
me.
Larry, you lost that many
And
pounds.
somehow, if we can conduct our meetings as we're walking the trails, it'll be a lot
There you
healthier
go.
for us. All right.
Treadmills.
All right, is there any other public comment?
Motion to adjourn.
All right, we stand adjourned.